The morning air at Westbrook Military Academy was sharp and cold, the kind that made the recruit's breath look like smoke rising from a battlefield. The cadets stood in formation across the wide training field, their boots aligned in crisp rows, uniforms spotless. Behind them loomed the academy's tall gray barracks, a fortress of discipline and pride. The commandant, a stern man named Colonel Whitaker, adjusted his cap as a new figure approached from across the field. She was not what anyone expected. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Halt walked with quiet confidence, her stride steady but unhurried. She wore a simple gray sweatshirt and black training pants instead of dress blues. Her hair was tied back in a no-nonsense braid. No visible rank insignia, no display of ribbons or medals, just calm, unreadable eyes and a faint scar that curved along the side of her neck, almost invisible unless the light hit it right. The cadets whispered as she passed. "Who's she supposed to be?" one murmured. "Some fitness coach, I think. Looks too soft for combat training." Another snorted. Sarah heard every word, but she didn't flinch. She'd been called worse by enemies who actually meant it. She reached the center of the field, facing the rows of cadets who stood taller now, curious but skeptical. Colonel Whitaker raised his voice. "Cadets, this is your new physical training instructor, Lieutenant Commander Halt." A ripple of confusion went through the ranks. Lieutenant Commander. That was a high rank, usually reserved for field veterans or special operations officers. But this woman didn't look like the war-hardened type. No swagger, no bark in her tone, just a calm presence that somehow demanded silence. Whitaker continued. "Commander Halt has served in multiple overseas deployments and brings extensive combat experience. You'll show her the same respect you give every officer." Sarah gave a slight nod, her voice steady but soft. "Thank you, Colonel." Then she turned to the cadets. "Morning, everyone." Her tone was light, almost too light for the field. "Out here, you'll be training with me 3 times a week. I don't care how fast you think you are, how strong you claim to be, or what you've done before. You'll prove it here." A few smirks spread through the crowd. Sarah noticed and smiled faintly herself. She continued. "In my experience, strength isn't in your arms. It's in your head. You'll learn to push when every bone tells you to stop. You'll learn to respect the person next to you, even if they can't keep up. And by the time I'm done with you," her voice dropped slightly, a hint of iron beneath the calm, "you'll understand what real endurance means." The cadets remained quiet, but the looks they exchanged were full of disbelief. When the briefing ended, Sarah began the morning drill. 10 laps around the field," she called. "Full gear!" A collective groan rippled across the group. Danner, tall, broad-shouldered, with a cocky half-smile, muttered under his breath, 10. She's got to be kidding." Sarah's head turned. Her voice was firm but quiet, the kind of tone that carried authority without needing volume. "Something to say, Cadet Danner?" He straightened. "No, ma'am." "Good," she replied. "Then make it 12. Laughter burst out from the sidelines, but it died fast when Sarah's eyes swept across them. Not angry, just piercing. There was something in her gaze that made them all shift uncomfortably, as if she could see straight through their bravado. The run began. Within minutes, the cadets were sweating hard. Sarah ran with them. No whistle, no yelling, just a silent rhythm that never broke. She kept her pace steady, her breathing controlled. By the 7th lap, half the squad was slowing down. By the 10th, Danner was dragging his boots through the dirt. And by the 12th, Sarah finished exactly where she started. Calm, unshaken, barely sweating. She looked at Danner, who was panting heavily. "What's wrong, Cadet?" "Thought you were faster than your instructor." He scowled. Didn't realize we were competing. Sarah smiled thinly. We're not. I stopped competing years ago. Surviving became more interesting. The words confused him. He didn't realize yet how literal she meant them. After drills, the cadets gathered around the bleachers, laughing and complaining under their breath. Sarah walked past them, clipboard in hand, pretending not to hear. One cadet, Peterson, whispered loudly. She talks tough, but she doesn't look like she's ever seen combat. Another chimed in, probably one of those Navy office types. Pushed papers while real soldiers fought. A group snickered. Sarah paused mid-step, but didn't turn. She dealt with arrogance before, usually from men younger than her, trying to measure themselves by comparison. She wasn't offended. She was disappointed. Later that evening, she stood alone on the field. The sunset painted the sky orange and gold. She stared at the flagpole, her hands in her pockets, breathing deeply. The smell of wet earth reminded her of Afghanistan after a sandstorm, dust, sweat, and silence. A faint memory flickered, gunfire echoing through a crumbling village. Her team crouched behind a stone wall, her heartbeat pounding like a war drum. Move! Halt! Someone had shouted. She had moved, dragged a wounded teammate out of the line of fire. Her uniform soaked in blood and sand. Now, years later, the only battlefield she stood on was a grassy academy field, surrounded by kids who didn't know what war felt like. Maybe that was a good thing. Maybe that's why she was here, to teach them before the world did. The next morning, she returned to find the cadets standing in formation again. She walked the line, inspecting uniforms. Her gaze fell on Danner, whose boots were slightly unpolished. Your boots, cadet. He glanced down. Yes, ma'am. Didn't have time this morning. Sarah's eyes met his. Then you'll find time after 20 extra laps. Clean boots reflect discipline, not vanity. He clenched his jaw, biting back frustration. Understood, ma'am. When she walked away, his friend Peterson muttered, She's power tripping. Danner didn't reply. Something about her tone, calm, but absolute, stuck in his mind. It wasn't ego. It was authority earned the hard way. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah blew her whistle. Everyone, circle up. The cadets gathered. Tomorrow, we'll begin combat movement training. No excuses, no complaints. Out there, you'll learn that the ground doesn't care who you are, officer, cadet, or veteran. It humbles everyone the same. Danner frowned. What do you mean, ma'am? Sarah looked toward the horizon, her eyes distant for a moment. Then she said quietly, You'll see soon enough. As they dismissed for the day, Danner turned to Peterson. I don't get her, he muttered. She acts like she's seen a war or something. Peterson laughed. Yeah, right. She probably couldn't handle a real battlefield. But that night, while Sarah sat alone in her small apartment, polishing the single medal she kept hidden, a silver star awarded for valor in Afghanistan, she whispered softly, You'd be surprised, cadet. The medal gleamed faintly in the dim light, and her reflection stared back, calm, scarred, and unbreakable. Tomorrow, she knew, the lessons would get harder. The cadets might think they were training for war, but for Sarah Halt, war had never truly ended. The next morning, the air at Westbrook Military Academy was thick with tension. Clouds hung low over the parade ground, heavy and gray, mirroring the mood of the cadets. Sarah Holt stood at the edge of the field, clipboard in hand, watching them stretch. She noticed the whispers and stifled laughter, cadets trying to maintain composure while testing her presence. Cadet Mark Danner leaned toward his friend Peterson. She's tough to read, he whispered. I still don't think she's seen real combat. Peterson snickered. Bet she's never even crawled through mud under fire. Sarah paused, hearing every word. Her calmness didn't waver. She had heard this type of arrogance before in Kandahar and Somalia. The kind of bravado that crumbled under pressure. "Cadets!" she called, her voice slicing through the chatter. They froze instantly. "Today, we'll focus on combat movement and endurance. Expect to get dirty. Expect to fail. But most importantly," she leaned in slightly, eyes scanning the front row, "expect the unexpected." Danner's smirk widened. "Yeah, right. How hard can she make it?" Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she instructed the group to gear up with standard-issue training rifles and weighted packs. She demonstrated a crawl under low barriers, rolling into the mud with effortless precision. Every movement was controlled, efficient, like a predator in rhythm with the environment. The cadets exchanged uneasy glances. Peterson muttered again. "Okay, that's kind of impressive." Danner scoffed. "Still nothing." The cadets lined up at the starting line of the mud field. Rain had begun to drizzle lightly, making the ground slick. "Crawl. Don't stop. Keep your head down. No whining," Sarah ordered. "Failure to comply will mean extra laps." Every time the cadets groaned, but none dared argue. Danner glanced at his friends, a cocky glint in his eyes. "We've got this," he whispered. The drill began. Mud sucked at boots, water splashed into eyes, and the chill cut into the cadet's skin. Sarah moved alongside them, observing quietly, correcting form with a few sharp gestures. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. The authority in her movements was enough to make them follow her lead. Halfway through, Danner began to falter. His chest heaved, and he gritted his teeth, thinking about quitting. He glanced at Sarah for a hint of mercy. There was none, just a calm gaze that somehow made him feel like a child being tested by a parent who knew far more than he did. "Don't slow down," she said, voice low but commanding. "The ground doesn't care about excuses." Danner bit back a retort, pushing forward, but frustration boiled over. "Ma'am," he snapped, slapping mud off his gloves. "You don't know what this is like. We've got limits." Sarah stopped suddenly, standing in front of him. Her presence was magnetic, her calm fury palpable. Limits are something you learn by testing, not whining about. Her eyes held a steel-hard edge, a quiet intensity that made Danner's bravado falter. A few cadets tried to stifle their laughter at the tense exchange, but Sarah's gaze swept the field like a hawk. "If you think this is hard," she said quietly, "try surviving without backup. Try making life-or-death decisions while your team counts on you. Then we'll talk about limits." The words hung in the cold air. Silence swept across the field. Even the wind seemed to pause. Danner, chest burning and mud coating his uniform, clenched his fists. "You've seen combat?" he asked quietly, almost a whisper. Sarah didn't answer. She simply turned and motioned for the cadets to resume the crawl. Every movement from her was precise, efficient, a silent lesson in discipline. By the end of the drill, the cadets were drenched, trembling, and completely exhausted. Mud caked their boots and uniforms. Danner collapsed onto his hands, panting. "Why didn't you make it easier?" he asked, voice shaky. Sarah knelt briefly beside him, not patronizing, but firm. "Because life isn't easier. And I refuse to let you learn that lesson the hard way later, when mistakes cost more than pride." The group shuffled back toward the assembly point, subdued. Whispers had turned into mutters of uncertainty. Cadets who laughed earlier now exchanged nervous glances. Something about her, her calm authority, her refusal to be impressed or intimidated, unsettled them. Later, During a break in the academy's gym, Danner leaned against a wall, eyes on Sarah as she adjusted equipment. Peterson approached him cautiously. "I think she's legit," he said quietly. "Yeah, sure," Danner replied, but his voice lacked conviction. He couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't a normal instructor. There was a weight behind her calmness, a history she wasn't sharing, but that radiated authority like a storm on the horizon. The following days, the cadets noticed small things. Sarah's ability to anticipate mistakes before they happened, her uncanny timing in positioning them during drills, the subtle correction of posture, the quiet but firm discipline, all hints of experience they couldn't yet comprehend. One evening, as dusk fell, Sarah stayed late, walking the perimeter of the field alone. She removed her cap, wiped sweat from her brow, and stared at the muddy terrain. Memories returned in sharp flashes. The burning sands of Helmand Province, the screams of a squad under ambush, the feel of sand against blood-soaked uniforms. She traced her hand over the faint scar along her neck, a souvenir from a mission gone wrong, a reminder of comrades lost. Teaching cadets was her way of keeping the lessons alive without the cost of blood. But she knew that sooner or later, they would realize the woman they had mocked, laughed at, and doubted had survived situations they couldn't even imagine. The next day, as the rain returned, she watched Danner try to keep pace with the drills. He stumbled, frustration evident, but determination was there too. Sarah's eyes softened slightly, recognizing potential, the same spark that had driven her through endless missions and impossible odds. "Remember," she called over the rain, her voice cutting through the cold drizzle. "Discipline isn't about power, it's about survival. And one day, he'll be thankful I didn't make it easy." Danner looked at her, mud dripping from his hair, and for the first time, the arrogance faded. There was fear, yes, but also something else. Respect tinged with awe. He didn't understand it fully yet, but he felt it deep in his chest. The field fell silent, except for the soft patter of rain and the distant clanging of boots against mud. The cadets had been tested, humiliated in small ways, and challenged beyond their comfort. They didn't know it yet, but their first real lesson had been delivered. And it wasn't a lesson in pride. It was a lesson in reality. Sarah walked back to the locker room, drenched, exhausted, yet unshaken. She didn't celebrate victories. She didn't seek recognition. She simply prepared for the next challenge, knowing that in a few weeks, the cadets would realize who she really was, and the ones who mocked her would wish they had paid attention earlier. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, the cadets were left with mud, sweat, and the lingering presence of someone far beyond their expectations. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Halt had entered Westbrook Military Academy quietly, but she had already begun to leave an impression that would haunt and inspire them in equal measure. Some would learn respect too late. Some would learn it just in time. But none would forget the first week of training and the woman who had silently dominated it all. Rain pelted the Westbrook Military Academy training grounds like tiny hammers, turning the dirt field into a thick, sucking mud pit. Cadets squelched forward under low wire barriers, mud seeping into every seam of their uniforms. Cold water ran down their faces, stinging their eyes, but the drill pressed on. This was no ordinary exercise. This was combat conditioning, and the cadets didn't know it yet. Danner was in the front row, chest heaving, mud clinging to his boots. Every nerve in his body screamed to quit. He had trained for endurance, for discipline, for the imagined pressure of officer drills. But this was chaos in slow motion. He glanced at Sarah Halt, standing at the edge of the mud, whistle in hand, her gray sweatshirt plastered to her frame, eyes scanning every cadet like a predator assessing prey. Peterson muttered beside him, shivering. She's insane. Danner smirked despite the exhaustion. Nah, she's just old. We can push through this. Peterson coughed. Have you seen the mud on her uniform? She's not slowing down at all. Sarah blew her whistle, a sound sharp against the patter of rain. Stop whining, cadets. Keep moving. I don't want excuses. I want results. Danner muttered under his breath. You don't know what you're doing, ma'am. That's when it happened. The words hit Sarah like a slap. You wouldn't survive a week out here, he said aloud, shoving her shoulder in frustration. The field froze. Every cadet stopped. Even the rain seemed to hesitate. Sarah's eyes snapped to him, calm, sharp, and freezing like steel. She didn't scream. She didn't lunge. She simply bent slightly at the waist and steadied herself, then stood taller, mud dripping from her soaked sweatshirt. The storm around them seemed to mimic the storm in her mind. Cadet Danner, she said softly, almost too quiet to hear over the rain. But everyone did. Every cadet leaned forward, sensing danger without understanding it. You just made the first mistake most men never live to see. Danner's smirk faltered. I didn't. Sarah stepped closer, her boots squelching in the mud. Do you know what real combat feels like? She asked, voice low and deliberate. Do you know what it's like to crawl through dirt while bullets tear the air around you? To carry your dying teammate on your back while chaos rips through everything you thought was safe? The cadets exchanged nervous glances. Some shifted their weight, uncomfortable with the sudden shift in tone. Danner, face red, stammered. I don't care. She interrupted, voice rising just enough to cut through the storm. I do. And I'll make sure you all understand that pain, that discipline, that resilience. Even if it's only through sweat and mud, you will respect this field, or it will humble you. Without another word, she grabbed a discarded training rifle from the mud and sprinted down the field, demonstrating a combat crawl with flawless efficiency. Mud sprayed in every direction. Her movements were precise, almost predatory. Every shift of weight calculated, every roll exact. She came to a stop in front of Danner, who could only stare, frozen and muddy. You think this is just a drill? She asked, voice cold. This is a lesson in survival, leadership, and respect. And yes, it will hurt. With a sudden motion, she blew the whistle again, signaling the cadets to resume. But this time, she pushed them harder, adding weighted packs, forcing rapid transitions from crawl to sprint, demanding perfect coordination under slippery, unpredictable conditions. The cadets struggled. Their hands slipped in the mud. Their knees burned. Breathing became shallow and ragged. Danner cursed under his breath. This isn't fair. Sarah stopped beside him, kneeling briefly so her eyes were level with his. Fair doesn't exist in combat, cadet. Only results, only survival, only discipline. Her calm presence was terrifying. Danner felt something he had never felt before, a mix of fear and awe. There was no arrogance in her movements, no wasted motion, just efficiency honed by years of real war. Then, without warning, she signaled the cadets into a high-intensity relay. They had to navigate obstacles, lift heavy crates, crawl under barbed wire, and dodge simulated fire. Sarah ran alongside them, correcting form, guiding technique, pushing every cadet past what they thought were their limits. By the halfway point, cadets were exhausted, soaked to the bone and trembling. Several began to falter, some on the verge of collapsing. Danner stumbled again, nearly toppling in the mud. Sarah appeared beside him instantly, placing a steadying hand on his shoulder. Do not fall, she said quietly, but with authority that brooked no argument. If you fall, you fail yourself. If you fail yourself, you fail your team. And in combat, failing your team can mean death. The words hit Danner like a physical blow. The mud, the rain, the exhaustion, none of it compared to the weight in her voice. His arrogance, the jokes, the mocking, all of it drained away, leaving only raw, uncomfortable respect. When the drill finally ended, the cadets were utterly spent. Their boots were caked, uniforms plastered with mud, faces streaked with dirt and rainwater. Danner sank to his knees, gasping, every muscle screaming in protest. Sarah stood in the center of the field, dripping wet, chest heaving lightly, but eyes steady and unwavering. She looked at each cadet, scanning them like a commander assessing the readiness of her team. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but resonant. Remember this day, not because it hurt, not because you struggled, but because you survived. And some of you, maybe all of you, will be tested harder, much harder. Today, the field taught you respect. Tomorrow, life might demand it. The cadets said nothing. The storm continued, rain pouring down, but no one moved. For the first time, the field was silent except for the rhythmic drip of water off helmets and boots. Danner's chest rose and fell rapidly, but in his eyes was a flicker of realization. He had underestimated her. He had mocked her. And now, standing in the mud, he understood. Sarah Holt was not just a training officer. She was combat-tested, disciplined, and unyielding, and he would never forget it. As they trudged back to the barracks, Peterson whispered, "I think she's seen real combat." Danner didn't respond. He couldn't. Something had shifted inside him. Pride, arrogance, and bravado had been replaced by a mixture of fear, respect, and a dawning sense of humility. That night, the cadets lay in their bunks, exhausted, drenched, and humbled. Sarah Holt returned to her small office, silently removing her soaked uniform, revealing the faint scars across her back and neck, hidden under sweat-stained clothing. She traced a finger over one of them, remembering her fallen comrades, missions gone wrong, and the lessons only fire and blood could teach. Tomorrow, the cadets would return to the field. They would stumble. They would complain. They might even try to mock her again. But the first seed of respect had been planted. And sooner or later, they would realize the woman they shoved into the mud had faced death more times than they could count and survived. This was not just training. This was a glimpse of real combat discipline delivered with quiet fury and unmatched authority. And the cadets, whether they knew it or not, would never see Sarah Holt the same way again. That night, Sarah Holt sat alone in the dim light of her apartment near the academy. The rain from the day's drills still clung to her hair, her uniform folded neatly on a chair. Outside, the city slept, but she could hear the distant hum of traffic, the occasional bark of a dog, sounds that reminded her of calm, ordinary life. Life she had once thought she would never reclaim. Her fingers traced the faint scar along her back, hidden beneath layers of clothing. The pain was subtle, almost a phantom now, but it carried memories sharp enough to bring her heart pounding. Each mark, each line on her skin told a story. A firefight in Afghanistan, a mission gone sideways in Somalia, a teammate she couldn't save. She had survived, yes, but survival had left its price. Shadows that lingered, thoughts that refused to leave, a guilt that never faded. A flashback seized her mind, vivid as if it were happening again. She was in Kandahar, the sun blinding and merciless. Her SEAL team had been deployed for a hostage rescue. They were moving swiftly through a narrow alley, boots kicking up dust, weapons ready, every sense heightened. The air smelled of gunpowder and fear. The mission was supposed to be precise, surgical, clean. But chaos has a way of sneaking in. A sudden ambush erupted. Bullets tore through walls and the ground near her feet. Sarah dove to the side, rolling into cover, She could hear Lieutenant Brooks, her teammate, shout, "Halt! We're pinned down!" She ran, pulling him to relative safety, but an explosion flung him sideways. She hit the ground, chest pounding, ears ringing, dust in her eyes. By the time she reached him, Brooks had been mortally wounded. His hand, trembling, reached for hers. "Sarah," he whispered, voice weak. "Go lead them." Tears mixed with mud on her cheek. She had promised herself she would save every life possible. But that day, she had failed. She carried him out as best she could, dragging him to safety. But she could not save him. She could only survive. She could only watch him slip away and pray she never carried that kind of loss again. The memory faded, but the pain lingered. Her breath shook as she sat upright, gripping the edge of the desk. She had buried herself in training, in discipline, in the endless routines of SEAL missions. She had survived where others had not. Every scar told a story of sacrifice, every twitch of muscle and reflex a testament to lessons learned in the crucible of war. And now she was here in a different kind of battlefield, Westbrook Military Academy. The cadets didn't know it, but she had faced death many times over, and she had done so with calm precision. She had learned to lead under fire, to inspire fear and respect, to survive. And yet, she had to hide it. She couldn't walk into the academy displaying medals, scars, or stories of missions. The cadets wouldn't understand. A knock at the door pulled her from the spiral of memory. It was her reflection in the darkened window, almost ghostly, framed by the dim light of the street lamp outside. She studied her own face, strong yet weary, eyes sharp yet haunted. That face had stared down death and loss repeatedly. But tonight, it stared into the quiet of an empty apartment, waiting for tomorrow's drill to test the cadets further. Her mind returned to the day's events. Danner had shoved her into the mud. The audacity of it, the arrogance. It had triggered something in her, not anger, but a reminder of what she had survived. The mockery, the disrespect, even the challenges. They were all small mirrors of past failures, small tests she had endured long before these cadets were born. She remembered her own first days as a SEAL, fresh out of training, young, full of confidence, untested in real combat. She had faced ridicule from veterans, endured extreme physical punishment, and questioned herself at every turn. The academy's field, the mud, the drills, they reminded her of those early days. The difference now was that she had mastered herself, and she intended to pass that mastery on to these cadets. In the quiet of her apartment, Sarah reviewed her plans for the coming week. Tomorrow would be harder. She would test the cadets' mental endurance, pushing them into the cold, wet, and chaotic environment of combat simulation. She wanted them to feel struggle, frustration, and fear, not for punishment, but for preparation. She could see Danner clearly in her mind, the way he had smirked, the arrogance in his posture, the disbelief in his voice. He would learn eventually, some sooner, some later. The field was an unforgiving teacher, but she would guide them through it. And when they finally understood, when they finally grasped what respect, discipline, and real endurance meant, they would never forget her lessons. Sarah turned to the small wooden box on her desk. Inside lay a silver star, carefully polished, but never worn in casual settings. The metal reminded her of Brooks, of those she had lost, of what survival had demanded. She touched it gently. Every mission, every hardship, every scar, it had all prepared her for this. Not for medals, not for recognition, but for moments like these, teaching the next generation, shaping them to survive and lead. She looked at the clock. Midnight. Her body ached from the day's drills, but her mind was alive, sharp, relentless. She allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The cadets didn't know yet what kind of person she was. They didn't know that the woman they shoved into the mud had stared death in the face, had carried friends from exploding vehicles, had survived ambushes where failure meant death. And when they learned the truth, as they inevitably would, the look of disbelief, awe, and respect on their faces would be priceless. Sarah finally stood and moved to the window, peering out at the rain-soaked training grounds below. Tomorrow, she would push them further. She would challenge their bodies, their minds, and their pride. She would make them uncomfortable. She would make them realize that the field, the mud, and the drills were not just tests of strength, but tests of character. And in that realization, some of them would find respect. Some would find humility. Some might even find a reflection of the discipline and resilience that had kept her alive all these years. She whispered to herself, almost as a promise, "You'll see soon enough. You'll see soon. You'll understand what it means to face fear and to survive it. You'll respect the ground you stand on and the person who teaches you to endure it." The rain fell harder, drumming against the roof. Sarah Holt, Navy SEAL veteran, survivor of countless battles, sat silently, waiting for dawn, waiting for the next test, waiting for the cadets to realize the truth of who she was, a lesson that could not be taught in classrooms, textbooks, or whispered rumors, a lesson that could only be learned in mud, sweat, and rain. And when they learned it, the academy would never be the same. The next morning, Westbrook Military Academy was tense with anticipation, though the cadets didn't know it yet. Rumors from the previous day's mud drill had spread like wildfire. Some whispered about Sarah Holt's uncanny efficiency. Some joked about her hidden SEAL skills. Most cadets dismissed it as exaggeration, a story growing larger in the imagination of those who had faced mud and rain under her command. Colonel Whitaker's voice cut across the parade ground. "Cadets, attention! You will report to the auditorium immediately. There will be a special briefing." Confused murmurs spread. Cadets hurried, boots splashing through puddles, hearts beating with curiosity and a tinge of apprehension. When they entered the auditorium, they found the room arranged with tiered seats facing a large stage, a projector set up at the front, and a hushed audience of both instructors and cadets. Sarah Holt stood at the side, calm as ever, adjusting the microphone with her dripping braid. Her posture radiated authority. Even soaked from the field the day before, she looked like she belonged in the spotlight, though she didn't crave it. Colonel Whitaker cleared his throat. "Cadets, today's briefing is different. I want to introduce someone extraordinary, someone whose experience will challenge what you think you know about discipline, endurance, and combat leadership." He stepped aside, gesturing toward Sarah. "Lieutenant Commander Sarah Holt, Navy SEAL Team 6. The room went silent. The murmurs died abruptly. Cadets blinked, unable to process the words. Navy SEAL Team 6, the elite of the elite, the most secretive, most decorated, most feared unit in the U.S. military. Their disbelief was visible in every face. Danner froze, the color draining from his face. His jaw slackened. He remembered her calmness, her piercing gaze, her flawless movements, the things he had mocked. Every moment of arrogance he had exhibited seemed foolish now. A series of images flashed on the projector. Sarah in full combat gear, desert camouflage streaked with dust, her SEAL insignia gleaming. Photos showed rescue missions, recon operations, and medals awarded for valor under fire. There was one image that stopped Danner cold. A team crouched in a ruined village, Sarah dragging an injured teammate to safety, blood and dust mixing on their uniforms. Gasps echoed through the auditorium. Cadets exchanged wide-eyed glances, some whispering, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Sarah stepped forward, voice steady, calm, carrying the weight of her experience. I know many of you have doubts about what you can endure, what you are capable of. I know some of you laughed at me, mocked me, and questioned my authority. I won't hide it. You are right to doubt. You are right to challenge me because the only way to learn is through testing your limits. Danner's mouth opened, but no words came. He could only stare, mud-streaked and humbled. Sarah continued. What you see on the screen are moments that demanded everything of me. Focus, endurance, courage, leadership. These were not easy lessons, and I lost people along the way. You are fortunate. You face no bullets today, no explosions, no life or death decisions yet. But the principles are the same. Respect, discipline, teamwork. They are not earned in words or pride or smirks. They are earned in action. And action is what this academy will demand of you. The room was silent. Every cadet transfixed. The air felt heavier, charged with a mix of awe, fear, and realization. Cadets who had mocked her yesterday, who had whispered cruel jokes about grandma's soldier or fitness coach, now felt the weight of their misjudgment. Danner, finally finding his voice, muttered, I didn't know. His words trailed off. Sarah's eyes softened slightly, but her tone remained firm. You weren't supposed to. That's the point. Assumptions are dangerous. You never truly know what someone has endured until you face it yourself, until they show you through their actions. And that is why I'm here, to push you, challenge you, and prepare you for the realities of leadership and survival. A hand went up in the back row. A younger cadet, trembling, asked, Ma'am, how did you survive all of it? Sarah paused, letting the question hang in the room. Then she answered, voice low but resolute. Survival isn't about luck. It's about preparation, discipline, and knowing who and what you can trust. It's about making decisions when fear is screaming in your ear. And it's about carrying responsibility for yourself and for others, even when it feels unbearable. The cadets were silent, absorbing the weight of her words. Sarah walked slowly down the center aisle, eyes scanning every face. Yesterday, you saw me in mud, rain, and exhaustion. You thought it was a drill, something trivial, even mockable. Today, you know better. The woman you shoved into the dirt has carried lives through real fire, faced death directly, and survived. Not because I was stronger than fear, but because I refused to let it control me. The auditorium seemed to hold its breath. Cadets shifted uncomfortably, some straightening their backs, others hiding stunned expressions behind clenched hands. Danner's chest heaved. Pride, embarrassment, and awe collided in a storm of emotion he couldn't yet name. Sarah raised a hand. This is a lesson for all of you. Never underestimate anyone based on appearance. Never judge by voice, stature, or confidence. You never know the battles someone has fought, and that includes the ones within themselves. Today, the mud you crawl through is trivial, but one day, the lessons you learn here could save your life, or the lives of those who depend on you. Cadets sat silently, some nodding slowly, absorbing the truth. The shift in atmosphere was palpable. What had begun as mockery, arrogance, and rebellion had transformed into humility, respect, and awe. Danner's eyes met Sarah's. For the first time, he didn't see an ordinary instructor. He saw experience, courage, and authority forged under fire. The arrogance that had guided him yesterday was gone, replaced by a newfound reverence. The commandant cleared his throat. Cadets, Lieutenant Commander Holt's service record speaks for itself. Take this as a lesson. Respect is earned, not assumed. And some lessons, the hardest ones, are taught not with words, but with action. The cadets stood, applause breaking the tension, though many were hesitant, still grappling with the revelation. Some clapped with vigor, others quietly, almost in disbelief. Danner remained silent for a moment, processing the shock before finally joining the clapping. Slower, more deliberate, as if acknowledging not just her past, but the truth of the woman before him. Sarah stepped back, letting the moment settle. No further explanation was needed. The cadets had seen enough. They had witnessed humility tested, arrogance humbled, and authority earned through action rather than assertion. As the assembly ended, cadets filed out, some whispering, others silent in reflection. The mockery of yesterday seemed like a distant memory, replaced by a collective realization. Sarah Halt was no ordinary instructor. She was a Navy SEAL veteran, a survivor, and a teacher whose lessons extended beyond the mud, the rain, and the drills. That afternoon, Danner lingered on the parade ground, boots still muddy, eyes following Sarah as she oversaw a smaller tactical drill. For the first time, he saw not just the instructor, but the leader, the survivor, the woman who had endured what he could not imagine. He finally whispered to Peterson, I didn't realize. She's incredible. Peterson nodded, eyes wide. I think we all underestimated her big time. Sarah watched from a distance, silent but satisfied. She didn't need accolades. She didn't need recognition. But she understood the power of respect earned, felt, and lasting. Tomorrow, the drills would resume, and the cadets would approach them with a new understanding of effort, discipline, and authority. But some lessons, she knew, went deeper than any drill could reach. They were lessons of courage, humility, and the truth of endurance under fire. And those lessons, once absorbed, would stay with them forever. The morning air at Westbrook Military Academy was cold, crisp, and unusually quiet. The cadets lined up on the parade ground, their wet uniforms from yesterday still clinging to their bodies. Today, however, there would be no rain, at least not yet. Sarah Holt strode across the field, boots crunching in the gravel, her expression calm but firm. She had anticipated the cadets' shock from yesterday's revelation, but she also knew that awe and respect alone would not prepare them for what was coming. Cadets, she began, voice sharp and precise. Yesterday you learned the truth about assumptions. Today you'll learn this truth about limits, yours, mine, and the field's. This is not a drill for ego. This is a drill for survival, for teamwork, for discipline. Danner exchanged a glance with Peterson. His chest still burned from yesterday's mud drill, but he straightened his back, a flicker of determination in his eyes. They had both realized that mockery and arrogance held no place here. Not when Sarah Holt commanded the field. Sarah blew her whistle, the sharp sound echoing across the training ground. Move to the obstacle course. Gear up with weighted packs and training rifles. Every misstep costs your team time. Every lapse in form costs you endurance points. Failure will be cumulative. The cadets scrambled into formation. Boots splashing through puddles, straps tightening, rifles clutched firmly. The obstacle course loomed ahead. Walls to climb, trenches to crawl through, ropes to scale, and a mud pit that tested both balance and courage. First team, Sarah barked. Go! Danner's team lunged forward. Mud squelched underfoot as he vaulted over the first wall, gritting his teeth against the strain. Peterson struggled to keep pace, slipping once and falling into the mud. A sharp whistle sounded. Sarah's piercing eyes locked onto him. Cadet Peterson, she called. Get up. Every failure you avoid costs your team. You are not a spectator. You are a participant. Move. Peterson scrambled, mud streaking his uniform, heart pounding. He realized that the stakes were not just personal. They were collective. Every mistake affected the team, and every success depended on effort, attention, and perseverance. Sarah moved along the course with a precision that was almost unnerving. She corrected stances, adjusted grips, and demonstrated proper techniques without breaking her own stride. Every movement was calculated, every word a lesson in efficiency. At the climbing wall, Danner's forearms burned, muscles trembling as he gripped the slick surface. Peterson, exhausted, struggled behind him. Cadets farther back were already floundering. Sarah walked up beside Danner, her voice low but intense. "Do not rely on strength alone," she said. "Leverage your body, focus your mind, anticipate each move. Combat is not about brute force. It's about precision, patience, and control." Danner paused, nodding, letting her words guide him. With careful foot placement and controlled breath, he ascended the wall, reaching the top without incident. Peterson followed, his own fear and exhaustion giving way to cautious determination. The mud pit came next, a deep, treacherous stretch that required crawling under wires and dodging simulated obstacles. Cadets slid and floundered, mud coating every inch of their bodies. Danner's hands slipped. Peterson groaned as he struggled forward. Sarah blew the whistle again, sharp and unrelenting. "Form, control, discipline. If you think the mud is an obstacle, you are already defeated." Her words cut through the discomfort, forcing the cadets to focus. Slowly, methodically, they began moving in unison, following her lead, responding to her guidance. What had started as chaos became rhythm, a lesson in teamwork and endurance, one that required every ounce of energy, attention, and willpower. Halfway through the course, Sarah stopped the cadets. They were soaked, covered in mud, panting, muscles screaming in protest. She surveyed them with a calm, unreadable gaze. "Look at yourselves," she said quietly but firmly. "Exhausted, dirty, struggling. Yet here you are. You have not quit. You have not surrendered. That is the first step toward respect for yourself, for your team, and for the challenge. The world will not make exceptions for pride or comfort. This field, this course, this mud, they do not care about excuses. Neither will life." She walked through the group, adjusting posture, correcting technique, offering short, precise commands. Every cadet felt the weight of her experience, not through intimidation, but through quiet authority, honed by years of combat. "Cadet Danner," she said, stopping in front of him. "You are stronger than you realize, but you have relied too much on brute force. Discipline your movements. Anticipate the next step. Lead your team by example." Danner nodded, mud dripping from his face. For the first time, he realized that leadership was not about command or authority. It was about control, precision, and example. Qualities Sarah embodied completely. The final challenge was a relay through a series of trenches, each filled with mud and water. Cadets had to carry weighted packs, sprint between obstacles, and coordinate with their teammates. Fatigue was universal, and many faltered. Sarah walked among them, correcting grips, urging effort, and demonstrating the proper use of body mechanics under strain. "Cadets!" she called, voice rising above the rain and exertion. "Do not let exhaustion cloud judgment. Move with intent, move with precision, move as one. The mission is never about ego, it's about survival." By the end of the relay, every cadet was utterly spent, drenched, trembling, covered in mud. They had pushed themselves beyond what they thought possible. For Danner and Peterson, the lesson was clear. Sarah Holt's methods were harsh, yes, but effective beyond imagination. As they gathered at the finish line, catching their breath, Sarah addressed them again. Today you learned endurance. Tomorrow, you will learn teamwork under pressure. The lessons build on one another. Do not underestimate this process. Respect the training, respect each other, and respect the discipline required to survive and lead. Cadets nodded silently. Pride and arrogance were gone. In their place was respect, hard-earned and lasting. Later in the locker room, Danner turned to Peterson. I didn't think I could finish that, he admitted, voice shaky. She made me stronger, and not just physically. Peterson, equally exhausted, nodded. Yeah, I get it now. She's not just training us. She's teaching us to survive, to lead, and to respect what we don't yet understand. Sarah Holt, meanwhile, prepared her own gear for the next day's drills. Her mind was calm, disciplined, focused on the cadets' progress. She didn't seek acknowledgement, but she understood the subtle shift in the room, a transformation not of bodies alone, but of minds. Outside, the rain had stopped. The mud dried slightly under the weak afternoon sun, but the lessons lingered. Danner and Peterson would carry them in every muscle, every joint, every thought for weeks to come. And in the quiet, Sarah Holt allowed herself a small, unspoken satisfaction. The cadets were learning slowly but surely what true endurance, discipline, and respect meant, and that no one, not even a cocky cadet, could underestimate her again. Tomorrow the trials would continue, even harder, even more relentless. But the foundation had been set. Strength under pressure, discipline in action, and respect earned, not assumed. And for the first time, Danner realized he had no excuses left. Only work, sweat, and the silent guidance of a woman who had survived more than he could ever imagine. The sky was a steel-gray canvas over Westbrook Military Academy. As the cadets assembled for what Sarah Holt called the ultimate test. The field was silent, except for the occasional gust of wind and the squelch of mud under boots. Cadets lined up, eyes scanning the terrain ahead. A complex obstacle course had been set up, combining every challenge they had faced over the past week, now amplified in intensity and length. Danner's chest tightened. His muscles ached from the previous drills. Yet, there was an undercurrent of anticipation in the group. The revelation of Sarah's SEAL past had left them awed. But this test would demand more than awe. It would demand everything. Sarah stepped forward, voice calm but commanding. Cadets, today is the culmination of your training. Every drill, every challenge, every lesson has led to this. You will face physical strain, mental pressure, and teamwork challenges simultaneously. Some of you will fail. Some of you will rise, but everyone will learn. The cadets exchanged nervous glances. Danner could feel his throat tighten, but there was also a spark, a hunger to prove themselves, not just to Sarah, but to themselves. First stage, endurance and navigation. Sarah continued. You will traverse the obstacle course with full packs, tracking points at checkpoints. Failure to maintain formation or discipline will result in penalties. The whistle blew. Cadets surged forward. The first obstacle was a series of walls of varying heights. Mud slicked the surfaces, and cadets slipped repeatedly. Peterson grunted as he clung to the top of a wall, straining his fingers. Danner, recalling Sarah's guidance, moved deliberately, anticipating each step, adjusting his grip. Sarah's eyes roamed the course, calm but intense. She moved fluidly alongside them, correcting postures, offering short, precise instructions. Every motion she made radiated experience. Cadets who had struggled earlier now began to mirror her efficiency, their movements sharper, more coordinated. The next obstacle was a rope traverse over a shallow water-filled trench. Cadets' hands stung from friction and cold. Mud slicked the ropes, and several began to falter. Sarah stopped near Danner, observing him closely. "Cadet Danner," she said, voice low but sharp. "Do not rely on strength alone. Use balance, core control, and focus. Panic will destroy you faster than fatigue." Danner nodded, muscles trembling. He centered himself, following her advice, and traversed the rope flawlessly. Peterson followed, struggling, but inspired by Danner's composure. As they progressed, Sarah introduced mental challenges, puzzles to solve under pressure, cryptic codes to decipher while performing physical tasks. Cadets were forced to switch between focus and exertion, testing both mind and body. By midday, the cadets were drenched in sweat, mud, and exhaustion. Their pace slowed. Some whispered doubts. Some cursed under their breath. But Sarah remained a constant, guiding, correcting, motivating. "Cadets," she called over the wind, "remember why you are here. This is not punishment. This is preparation. Every movement, every decision, every ounce of effort matters. You are a unit. You succeed or fail as one." The next stage was the final endurance crawl, a long stretch of mud and barbed wire, requiring cadets to work in pairs. Danner and Peterson paired up, moving cautiously, communicating silently, coordinating movements. A camaraderie built over the previous days now became essential. Cadets who had been rivals were now relying on each other completely. Sarah moved along the line, her presence commanding yet unobtrusive. She stopped only briefly, kneeling beside a cadet who had slipped and was trembling from exhaustion. "Look at me," she said, voice steady. "Pain is temporary. Discipline is permanent. Focus on what you can control, not what terrifies you." The cadet nodded, a spark of determination lighting his eyes. He resumed, crawling forward with renewed vigor. As the line neared the final checkpoint, Sarah signaled the simulated rescue scenario. A cadet was injured and had to be carried across the last stretch of mud to safety. Teams scrambled to lift, carry, and support each other, testing physical strength, strategy, and trust. Danner found himself carrying a teammate over mud and water, muscles screaming, lungs burning, yet he felt a surge of clarity. Every lesson Sarah had taught, balance, anticipation, teamwork, guided his movements. Step by step, he crossed the final stretch. Peterson followed, supporting another teammate. At the finish line, Sarah stood with arms crossed, rain-soaked and imposing, watching every cadet complete the course. The mud, the exhaustion, the mental strain, all of it culminated here. And yet, every cadet who crossed that line bore a subtle transformation: respect, humility, endurance, and the beginnings of leadership. She blew her whistle, signaling the end of the test. Cadets collapsed in the mud, gasping for air, exhausted beyond measure. Danner sank to his knees, chest heaving, staring at Sarah. You pushed us harder than anything I've ever experienced," he muttered. "And we made it." Sarah approached him, eyes calm but intense. "You did more than make it. You endured. You adapted. You led when you had no choice but to follow. That is what leadership demands. That is what survival demands. That is what discipline demands." The other cadets, hearing this, looked up, exhaustion mingling with newfound pride. They had survived the ultimate test. Not just the mud, the obstacles, or the physical strain, but the mental trial of persistence, focus, and teamwork. Sarah didn't smile, didn't offer praise in the conventional sense. Her satisfaction lay in their transformation, subtle yet profound. Every exhausted face, every mud-caked uniform, Every trembling limb was a testament to effort, resilience, and respect earned. Colonel Whitaker approached, observing silently. He had watched many instructors attempt to push cadets to their limits, but few matched the intensity and authority Sarah Halt brought. Cadets who had mocked her now looked at her with reverence, some unable to speak, others nodding solemnly in acknowledgement. "Cadets," Sarah finally addressed them, voice carrying above the wind. "Today, you faced not just a course, but yourselves. You faced fatigue, frustration, and fear. You faced your own assumptions and limitations. Some of you succeeded, some of you failed, but all of you learned." The cadets absorbed her words, silence stretching across the field. Then, almost simultaneously, murmurs of agreement, relief, and newfound understanding began to ripple through the group. Danner, mud streaked across his face, looked at her, said quietly, "I understand now. Not just respect, but why it matters, why we endure, why we follow someone like you." Sarah nodded once, approvingly, but without indulgence. "Good. That understanding is the foundation. Build on it every day. Respect is not given, it is earned. Discipline is not optional, it is survival. And leadership is not a title, it is responsibility, action, and example." The rain began to ease, sunlight breaking through the gray clouds. The cadets, exhausted, muddy, yet transformed, began to pick themselves up. They had faced their ultimate challenge, and in surviving it, they had gained far more than physical endurance. They had gained insight, respect, and the realization that Sarah Holt was not just a teacher, but a living embodiment of everything she had demanded from them. As the cadets trudged back to the barracks, Peterson whispered to Danner, "I get it now. She's the real deal, not just a veteran, a leader, someone you can't ignore." Danner nodded, eyes thoughtful. "Yeah, and she's earned every bit of that respect, every scar, every mission, every drill." Sarah Holt stood on the field alone for a moment, surveying the exhausted but transformed cadets. She didn't seek recognition or thanks. She had survived worse than mud, rain, or mockery. But in that quiet moment, she allowed herself a small satisfaction. The cadets had learned discipline, endurance, and respect the hard way. And she had guided them through it with precision, authority, and the quiet strength of experience. Tomorrow she would prepare new challenges, even more demanding. But today, she allowed herself to witness the result. A transformation of pride into humility, arrogance into respect, and in every mud-caked face, the spark of understanding. It would stay with them forever. The ultimate test had been completed, and no cadet who had faced it would ever doubt Sarah Halt again. The sun rose over Westbrook Military Academy, casting a golden glow across the parade ground. The mud had dried slightly, and the air was calm, almost serene. A stark contrast to the chaos, exhaustion, and intensity of the previous days. Yet for the cadets, nothing about these last weeks would ever feel serene again. Their bodies were sore, their muscles screaming, and their pride humbled. But their minds were sharpened, their perspective forever changed. Sarah Holt stood at the front of the formation, her uniform clean, posture flawless, and eyes steady. She had overseen countless cadets before, but this group, the ones who had mocked her, underestimated her, and pushed boundaries in every possible way, were different. They had been tested, and they had survived. They had learned, perhaps unwillingly, the lessons that only experience and endurance could teach. Colonel Whitaker approached, his expression stern but approving. "Cadets," he said, "today marks the end of the most challenging training sequence in the Academy's history. Lieutenant Commander Halt has guided you through mud, rain, exhaustion, and mental strain. She has shown you discipline, endurance, and leadership that few outside these walls could comprehend. Whispers and glances passed between the cadets. The weight of the moment was tangible. Even Danner, who had been the most vocal skeptic, stood straighter, absorbing every word. Whitaker continued, "You have faced challenges designed to push you beyond your limits. Some of you failed. Many succeeded, but all of you have learned to respect the discipline and authority required to survive. Not just here, but in life. And that respect begins with someone who has lived it." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Halt. The words hung in the air. Cadets looked at Sarah, their expressions a mix of awe, humility, and deep appreciation. No one dared speak out of turn. The woman before them was no longer just an instructor. She was a living testament to courage, survival, and leadership. Sarah stepped forward, her voice calm, but carrying a resonance that commanded attention. "Cadets, I did not bring you here to be comfortable. I did not bring you here to feed your ego or inflate your pride. I brought you here to see yourselves clearly, to test your limits, and to understand what discipline, endurance, and respect truly mean." She paused, scanning the muddy, exhausted faces in front of her. "You mocked me, doubted me, even disrespected me. And that was your right. I was prepared to earn your respect the hard way, because that is how it works in real life, in combat, and in leadership. Respect is not granted. Respect is earned. And now, having endured the trials, you have earned it." A murmur of acknowledgement ran through the cadets. Some bowed their heads slightly. Others simply nodded. Danner's face was solemn, his arrogance replaced by humility. He swallowed hard, realizing just how profoundly he had underestimated her. Sarah continued, "You have learned teamwork under pressure, mental and physical endurance, and the importance of leading by example. But the greatest lesson is this: never assume you know someone's story, their struggles, or their abilities. Judgment without knowledge is dangerous. Humility and observation are strengths, not weaknesses." The cadets absorbed every word, every physical strain, every punishing drill, every moment of humiliation in mud and exhaustion had transformed into understanding and respect. For some, it was a revelation. For others, a hard-earned truth they would carry for life. Whitaker stepped aside, giving Sarah the floor. "Cadets, as a final recognition, we honor Lieutenant Commander Halt for her extraordinary service, her dedication, and her unparalleled contribution to your training. Today, she is not just your instructor. She is your mentor, your guide, and your example." For the first time, applause erupted. The cadets clapped vigorously, not just for formalities, but for the recognition of everything she had endured and demonstrated. The sound was thunderous, echoing across the parade ground, a chorus of respect earned through experience, authority, and sheer resilience. Danner approached Sarah afterward, boots still muddy, uniform disheveled, but eyes filled with admiration. "Ma'am, I misjudged you," he said quietly, voice shaky. "I mocked you, doubted you, and I'm ashamed. But I understand now. You're incredible, more than I can put into words." Sarah's expression softened slightly. "Acknowledgement is a start," she said. "Now it's your turn. Take what you've learned and apply it, not just on the field, but in life. Leadership, discipline, respect. They are not lessons confined to training. They shape who you are and who others will follow." Peterson approached too, speaking earnestly. "I didn't realize the kind of challenges you faced, the things you survived. I get it now, and I won't forget it. Sarah nodded. Good. Never forget it. And never assume you understand someone's limits or experiences until you've seen them endure them firsthand. Later, as the cadets cleaned up and prepared to leave the field, whispers spread about Sarah Holt's Navy SEAL background, her combat missions, and her remarkable resilience. Stories that had seemed like exaggerations became reality, and the cadets' respect deepened with every retelling. Even those who had been skeptical, those who had mocked her, now carried a quiet reverence. They realized that strength and leadership were forged not in boastful words or arrogance, but in action, perseverance, and experience. Lessons Sarah had embodied every single day of the past week. By the end of the day, the cadets had transformed. Their postures were different, their gaze sharper, their demeanor more disciplined. They walked not just as students of a military academy, but as individuals who had faced challenge, endured hardship, and learned the weight of respect. Sarah Holt returned to her office, quietly reflecting on the past week. The challenges had been immense, physically, mentally, and emotionally, for both cadets and instructor alike. But she allowed herself a small moment of satisfaction. The cadets had changed. They had learned to see beyond appearances, endure under pressure, and respect authority grounded in experience. She glanced at a photograph on her desk. Her SEAL team, some of whom had fallen in combat, others retired, all bonded by experiences too intense for words. A pang of grief and pride washed over her. Every scar, every mission, every sacrifice had led her here to this moment where she could shape the next generation. Tomorrow, the cadets would return to normal routines. Yet, the lessons of endurance, discipline, and respect would remain etched in their minds forever. And the memory of the woman they once mocked, the woman they had shoved into mud and rain, would serve as a constant reminder of courage, authority, and perseverance. For Sarah Holt, the story was not about recognition or glory. It was about the legacy she left behind. Cadets transformed, humbled, and inspired to carry the principles of endurance, leadership, and respect into every facet of their lives. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the academy grounds, Sarah Holt looked out over the field one last time. She allowed herself a quiet, unspoken thought. They had earned more than her respect. They had earned their own. And in that moment, a sense of closure, of accomplishment, and of enduring legacy settled over her. The cadets had learned, the truth had been revealed, and the woman who had once been mocked in the mud had become an unshakable symbol of resilience and authority. The story of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Holt, Navy SEAL, combat veteran, an extraordinary instructor, would be remembered in the halls of Westbrook Military Academy for years to come. Not for the drills, not for the mud, but for the lesson that true respect is earned, not assumed, and that courage, discipline, and perseverance define not just a soldier, but a leader. And somewhere in the quiet of the evening, Sarah allowed herself a faint smile, knowing that the hardest battles, the battles of influence, mentorship, and legacy, had been won. In the heart of Westbrook Military Academy, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Holt's story unfolds as a powerful testament to one of life's most profound lessons. Never judge someone by their appearance, for true strength lies hidden beneath the surface, forged in the fires of unseen battles. Sarah, a Navy SEAL combat veteran with scars etched from Afghanistan's sands and Somalia's chaos, arrives unassuming, no medals flashing, no bravado in her step, only quiet confidence that the cadets dismiss as weakness. They mock her, shove her into the mud, and question her authority, blinded by their arrogance. Yet, through grueling drills in relentless rain and sucking mud pits, Sarah reveals her unbreakable spirit. She doesn't yell or demand respect. She earns it with every precise movement, Every life-or-death memory she silently channels into teaching endurance. As Danner and Peterson falter, gasping for breath, they glimpse the woman who dragged dying comrades from ambushes, who stared down fear when explosions tore the world apart. Their smirks fade into awe, their doubts into humility. This isn't just a tale of military rigor. It's a mirror to our everyday lives. How often do we underestimate the quiet colleague, the unassuming neighbor, or the scarred stranger, unaware of the wars they've waged in silence? Sarah's journey reminds us that resilience isn't loud. It's the steady rhythm of pushing forward when every fiber screams to quit. It teaches us empathy, to pause before judging, to recognize that everyone's story carries invisible weights. In a world quick to label and dismiss, her example urges us to seek the depth in others, to build our own fortitude through discipline and compassion. It's emotional because it hits home. We've all been the cadet, cocky and blind, or the veteran, quietly enduring. Let this inspire you to face your own mud pits with grace, honoring the hidden heroes around you. If this story moved you, stirred memories of your own underestimated moments, or sparked a fire to grow stronger, drop a comment below. Share your thoughts, your battles, and how you've learned respect the hard way. And if you're ready for more heart-pounding tales of triumph and transformation, hit that subscribe button now, turn on notifications, and join our community of warriors turning life's lessons into legacy. Your story could be next. What are you waiting for?